She wasn't allowed to move. Not her arms. Not her legs. Not even her lips. 8-year-old Raylee stood in that hallway for 3 days straight. While other children played in the next room, she stood there, silent, starving, dying of thirst. Her teachers saw the bruises. They made the calls. They begged someone to intervene. But the system looked away. And the people who promised to protect her? They made her invisible. By the time anyone realized what was happening, Raylee was already gone. This is the story of a little girl who slipped through every crack, who whispered for help in a world that refused to listen. This is the story of Raylee Browning. And I need to warn you, this one's going to hurt. Picture a little girl with brown hair and bright eyes. The kind of kid who lights up when someone remembers her name. That was Raylee Jolynn Browning. Born in 2010 in the mountains of West Virginia, she should have had a childhood full of scraped knees and laughter. School pictures, birthday parties, all the things we take for granted. But Raylee's life was never ordinary. Her biological mother wasn't around much. So as an infant, Raylee went to live with her father, Marty Browning Jr. He was dating a woman named Sherie Titchenell, and Julie's sister Sherie moved in too. 3 adults, 1 tiny girl. It should have been enough love to go around. It wasn't. Even as a baby, there were hospital visits, unexplained bruises, injuries that raised eyebrows, red flags that somehow everyone ignored. But for a brief, beautiful moment, Raylee got to be a normal kid. She went to Mount Lookout Elementary School, kindergarten, 1st grade. She had friends, teachers who smiled at her, a cafeteria with hot meals. And that's where people started to notice something was wrong. Her classroom teachers saw the belt marks on her back, the way she flinched when adults moved too quickly. They saw everything, and they did what they were trained to do. They called Child Protective Services. Multiple times. Raylee's own biological mother called too. She reported physical abuse, starvation, but nothing changed. CPS files went missing. Investigations stalled. Reports disappeared into bureaucratic black holes. And then one day in 2016, Raylee stopped coming to school altogether. The adults in her life had found a loophole, a way to make her disappear without anyone asking questions. They told the school district they were going to homeschool her. West Virginia law didn't require much. Just a notification. No follow-up. No home visits. No one checking to see if Raylee was actually being educated, or fed, or kept alive. The schoolhouse doors closed behind her, and Raylee Browning vanished into the shadows. Inside that house, Raylee became a ghost. According to Julie's teenage daughter, who lived there and witnessed everything, Raylee was treated differently from the other children. She wasn't part of the family. She was the punishment. Sherie Titchenell was supposed to be teaching her, homeschooling her. She wasn't. Instead, she made Raylee stand in the hallway, for hours, sometimes days, silent, still, forbidden to speak. While the other children learned their lessons in the next room, Raylee stood there, legs aching, stomach empty, throat dry. If she moved, even an inch, Sherie forced her to walk up and down the stairs, over and over, until her little legs gave out. She slept on the floor in Sherie's bedroom. No bed, no blanket, just cold hardwood and a diaper she was forced to wear because she wet herself at night. A trauma response. Her body screaming for help in the only way it knew how. They beat her with belts, wooden spoons, metal objects. Investigators later found a claw hammer in the room where she slept. Think about that for a second. A hammer, in an 8-year-old's bedroom. But the worst part? The part that makes this unbearable? They starved her. Not just missing a meal. Not just sent to bed without dinner. Days without food. Days without water. The teenage girl in the home later testified. There would be times Raylee would go hungry. Just go hungry. This wasn't neglect. This wasn't a parent overwhelmed and making mistakes. This was calculated, methodical, cruel. They were erasing her, one day at a time. In January 2018, the family moved to Oak Hill in Fayette County. A new town, new neighbors, No one who knew Raylee's name or remembered her smile. And the abuse continued. Hidden behind closed doors. Buried under the word homeschool. Then came December 2018, the day after Christmas. Raylee had been sick for days, her breathing shallow, her body so thin you could see her ribs through her shirt. She looked, according to witnesses, like she was fighting for air. She was bedridden, visibly dying. And the three adults in that house, her father, Julie, and Sherie, did absolutely nothing. No doctor, no medicine, no water. On Christmas night, while the rest of the world was warm and full and safe, Marty Browning went to sleep. His daughter was in the next room, gasping, fading, and he went to sleep. The next morning, December 26th, Raylee Browning was dead. Paramedics were finally called, but it was too late. She was 8 years old. Her body was emaciated, dehydrated, covered in what looked like bruises but were actually signs of bacterial pneumonia that had ravaged her from the inside out. The medical examiner would later say she died of sepsis, a severe infection, the kind of infection that's treatable, if anyone cares enough to try. The Oak Hill Police Department didn't waste time. They knew something was wrong the moment they stepped into that house. Officers collected evidence, interviewed the family, and what they found turned their stomachs. Alarms on Raylee's bedroom door, locks from the outside, weapons used to beat her, evidence of prolonged starvation. Medical experts were brought in. Pediatric specialists from Charleston Area Medical Center, child abuse experts with decades of experience. And every single one of them came to the same conclusion. This little girl had been tortured. Dr. Joan Phillips, one of the leading child abuse experts in the country, testified that Raylee had been a victim of medical abuse, a condition where caregivers fabricate illnesses to control a child. The adults in Raylee's life told doctors she had autism, eating disorders, self-harm tendencies, borderline personality disorder. She'd been prescribed 7 different psychiatric medications. 7. For an 8-year-old. But here's the thing. They never gave her the pills. Investigators found bottles of medication, nearly full, untouched. Why diagnose a child with so many disorders and then refuse to treat them? Because it was never about helping Raylee. It was about control, about making her the problem. She's difficult, they could say. She's sick. She does this to herself. They made her invisible by making her unbelievable. The West Virginia Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Alan Mock, reviewed the case. He couldn't definitively say whether Raylee's death was a homicide or natural causes, so he listed it as undetermined. But prosecutors knew better. This wasn't an accident. This was a crime. In December 2019, exactly 1 year after Raylee died, 3 people were arrested. Marty Browning Jr., Julie Titchenell Browning, Sherie Titchenell, charged with death of a child by a parent or guardian, and child abuse and neglect resulting in death. The trial began in June 2022. 6 days of testimony, medical records, police reports, photographs no one should ever have to see, and one voice that cut through all of it. Julie's 15-year-old daughter, Brooklyn. She sat in that witness stand and told the truth. About the punishments, the starvation, the hallway where Raylee stood in silence. About the days before Raylee died, when she was bedridden and gasping for air, and no one helped her. They told us to lie, Brooklyn said. If anyone ever asked about what happened at home, the defense tried to spin it. They said the adults made a bad decision in a moment of panic. But it wasn't criminal. Special Prosecutor Brian Parsons saw through it. They didn't want to take Raylee for treatment, he told the jury, because they knew there would be more questions they couldn't answer. The courtroom held its breath. And then the jury went to deliberate. June 13, 2022. The jury came back. Guilty. All 3 defendants. Guilty of child neglect resulting in death. But here's where it gets complicated. They were found not guilty of the more serious charge. Death of a child by abuse. Let me say that again. Raylee was beaten, starved, denied water for days, locked in a room, forced to stand in silence until her body gave out. But the jury said it was neglect, not abuse. A legal distinction that felt like a slap in the face. Because how do you neglect someone that severely without it being abuse? How do you watch a child die and call it anything other than murder? But the convictions stood. And in August 2022, Fayette County Circuit Judge Paul Blake handed down sentences. 3 to 15 years in prison. Each. At sentencing, Judge Blake didn't mince words. He looked at Marty Browning and said, "Any decent father would have scooped her up and took her to get help. You went to sleep that night while your child was dying. And you didn't care enough to do anything." To Julie Browning, "Where is your decency? You stood by and watched this child die." Raylee's biological mother, Janice Riston, spoke through tears. "You failed her horribly. You had to notice her losing weight. You can't pretend that our daughter isn't gone. And I blame you, because everyone in that courtroom knew the truth. Raylee Browning should still be alive." The 3 defendants appealed. Of course they did. They claimed their rights were violated, that evidence was improperly admitted. But in May 2025, the West Virginia Supreme Court of Appeals upheld every conviction. Justice had spoken. But for Raylee, it was too late. Her case sent shockwaves through the state. Lawmakers were horrified. The public demanded change. And out of that tragedy came something called Raylee's Law. Sponsored by Delegate Sean Fluharty, the proposed legislation would close a deadly loophole. Right now, in West Virginia, parents can pull their children out of school to homeschool them, even if teachers have reported abuse. Even if there's an open CPS investigation, they can just take them, and no one follows up. Raylee's Law would prevent that. It would pause a homeschool request if there's a pending child abuse investigation. Simple, logical, life-saving. And it's been blocked, year after year. In 2024, the bill passed the House of Delegates with bipartisan support. But the Senate never took it up. And tragically, another child died. If Raylee's Law had passed, she might still be alive. "This isn't an attack on people who homeschool," Fluharty said. "It's an attack on people who abuse children." But the law still hasn't passed. Raylee's story isn't just about one little girl. It's about every child who falls through the cracks. Every teacher who reports abuse and nothing happens. Every system that fails when it matters most. Raylee Browning stood in a hallway. For hours. For days. In silence. She wasn't allowed to speak. Wasn't allowed to move. Wasn't allowed to drink. And when her body finally gave out, when the infection and dehydration and starvation became too much, the adults who were supposed to love her did nothing. She died the day after Christmas. Alone. Suffering. Invisible. She was 8 years old. But her story doesn't have to end in darkness. So here's what I need you to think about. If a teacher sees the bruises. If a mother reports the abuse. If a little girl begs for food and water, how many warnings does it take before we actually listen? Look, I know these stories are hard to watch, but that's exactly why they matter. Every time you hit that like button, you're telling YouTube to show Raylee's story to more people. You're amplifying her voice, making sure she's not forgotten. Every time you share this video, you're starting a conversation. Maybe with someone who works in education, or child services, or someone who's seeing the signs in their own neighborhood and didn't know what to do. And when you subscribe to The Crime Attic, you're joining a community that refuses to look away, that believes these children deserve justice, that demands accountability. Because here's the truth. Most people will watch this video and move on with their day. But you're not most people. You're someone who stayed until the end, who cared enough to hear Raylee's full story. So don't let her story die here. Hit that like button. Subscribe, because there are more stories like hers that need to be told. And share this video. Tag your local representatives. Demand that laws like Raylee's Law get passed. The algorithm doesn't care about these kids. But you do. And that makes all the difference. Somewhere right now there's another Raylee, standing in a hallway, waiting for someone to notice, before it's too late. Don't let it be too late. I'll see you in the next one. And please, Stay vigilant.